Welcome to my testimony of how God rescued me from a generational curse of alcoholism, addictions, and anger. This is a testimony of how someone seemingly trapped in a cycle of addiction found hope and freedom. It's a reminder that no matter how deep someone's struggles go, God is always waiting to rescue them. Although I hated how my father abused me and my mother, I later fell into the same patterns of behavior. I fought for control, but my addiction only grew stronger, leaving me feeling hopeless and alone. Suddenly, Jesus appeared just when I was about to hit rock bottom. He began to unravel the generational curse, breaking its grip on me and leading me to a life of purpose. My testimony isn't just about sobriety. It's about finding salvation in a loving God who never gave up on me. Through the power of prayer, God restored my broken past and gave me a hopeful future. This testimony is my way of sharing a message of hope to others facing similar struggles in their lives. No matter how impossible things may seem, and no matter how deep your pain may go, there is always hope. If God can rescue me from a generational curse of alcoholism and anger, He can do the same for you. With His help, I have found freedom, purpose, and a joy that I never thought was possible. If you're ready to allow God to take control so you can break free from your struggles, I encourage you to keep watching. Know that we can overcome the darkest parts of ourselves and find redemption in a loving God who never gives up on us.
So welcome, guys. Welcome to this testimony with Aaron and Melanie. And Aaron is going to introduce himself and his wife, his beautiful wife. And what I'll do is just allow him to kind of just go and share his testimony. I'll try not to interrupt so that he can have a full, the full leeway to just go and introduce himself and share his testimony. And at the end, I'll try and write some notes and anything that I need to follow up on, I'll do that at the end. I'm going to try and do that. I'm going to try my best. Right? So Aaron, so let me introduce Aaron. This is Aaron right here. And he and his wife, Melanie, and he's going to share his testimony now. Okay.
Right. So, it's always hard to figure out where to begin because it's such a big story.
Why don't you begin where I saw your testimony first, was when you were a child and you were running out of your house, half naked, basically, on your mom, and the reason for that.
Yeah. Well, I grew up with a mother that was God-fearing, very much dedicated to her devotion and walk with Christ. My father believed in God, but his lifestyle was not one that was given to following any sort of precepts or any sort of biblical principle. So he had a really bad drinking problem. He was an alcoholic,
Mm-hmm.
and because of things in his childhood or whatever, he didn't really know how to handle disappointments and stresses and life in general. So he drank his worries and his problems and his scars and everything. Well, he tried to drink them away, but all that really did was amplify the hurt that he had, and the only way he knew how to express that was to lash out at those who were closest to him. I can only assume that's because that was done to him. But so he was a violent alcoholic. Like he got angry and rageful, and he lost self-control completely when he was drinking. So he would do things like chase us out of the house with machetes and with guns and knives. And as a child, I guess it should have been confusing, but it seemed so normal that people with regular lives that could go home and eat dinner together and watch TV and cartoons and relax in the living room with their family. That was strange to me.
Mm-hmm.
That was uncomfortable. Uh, Peace was uncomfortable
Mm-hmm.
to me.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
How
so
long did you live in a place where you did not, well, you thought this was normal? How long? Until what age?
uh, until I lived at home until I was 18,
Mm-hmm.
but around the age of 15, 16 years old. Actually, when I was at the age of 12, I remember I was walking through the neighborhood, and I'm a musician. We're musicians. I'm a drummer,
Mm-hmm.
first of all. And I was walking through the neighborhood, and I heard somebody playing drums, and I was just walking along because I didn't have a lot of friends. I was kind of
Mm-hmm.
a scared little
Mm-hmm.
boy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I didn't like to talk to people because I just didn't trust people.
Right.
And I heard someone playing drums in a garage. So I
Mm-hmm.
just walked into the garage, and it ended up being a guy named Chauncey Turpin, who turned out to be one of my best friends in life. So that was a place where, at 12 years old, I started to spend a lot of time uh, with Chauncey playing music and playing video games and stuff like that. But I would still have to come home to the situation that was here. As long as I stayed out, I guess it was a temporary, peaceful situation.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I finally kind of moved out of the house when I was 18, um, which just put me in another world of my own
Okay.
issues to deal with.
Okay. So before you moved out of your home, and you said that you didn't trust anyone. What would you say caused that trust? Lack of trust in anyone, basically.
Um, I guess not secretly, but subconsciously, I wanted a family that could enjoy one another. I wanted to know what it was like to be in a place where I could have peace. I don't know. I just wanted peace.
Right.
And I am looking at everyone else and thinking, if I can't have peace in my own home with my father,
Mm-hmm.
if my father, who is supposed to, uh, give me some
Protect.
type of sort of security,
Mm-hmm.
can't, if he can punch me in the mouth or he can pull a gun or a knife on me, it just kind of built a dependency on myself to figure out life. I mean, he taught us things like how to plant a garden, how to fight, how to handle a gun. But as far as handling emotions and having healthy relationships,
Mm-hmm.
that was something that we just kind of had to figure out, and still to this day try
Mm-hmm.
to figure out.
Right.
Uh,
Right. And so now you're married. So that is going to play a huge part in your relationship with Melanie. Um, the ability or the inability to show emotions or kind of share emotions or even kind of deal with her emotions. Is that something that you find is happening or has happened?
I'm terrible
With
at
emotion,
dealing with
right?
any emotion
Mm-hmm.
that is not anger.
You've
Right.
come a long way, though.
I
You've come a
have
long
gotten
way, for
better,
sure.
Mm-hmm.
but when people are sad
Mm-hmm.
or overexcited
Mm-hmm.
or anything but angry,
Mm-hmm.
it makes me angry.
Yes. 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 And later on, I really, as I mentioned before, I would love to have you guys on to deal with that part of the experience, right? Because since you know that you guys know that I'm a psychotherapist, I deal with relationships and couples. I'm a marriage and family therapist. That's what I was trained as, right? So later on we'll have you on for something else, but right now I want to kind of focus on the experiences in your childhood, your testimony. of how you came out of that, how God really kind of brought you out of it. And also, I remember that in one of the testimony I listened to on your channel, which is, I'm going to put link your channel below this video so they can go and listen to that, as look at your channel as well, is to make sure I remember that there was a Melanie, this is before you, so don't get upset. Okay, sweetie
No,
pie.
she's good.
I know. I'm just teasing her. So there was a young lady you met early, and you said you used to go over to that home, and that was the only time. You said you kind of wondered if this was, how is this normal? This is not happening, and I've never experienced this.
Yeah.
Right. So tell me a little bit about that experience of that change in your you're realizing that there was actually people who sat down to eat together,
Okay.
and yeah. So
Hmm.
tell me about that.
Yeah. So yeah, even my friend, the friend that I met at 12, even his family,
Yeah.
they were like it was a single mother, and they had a similar situation, but at least they could relax. This
Right.
family was a family that joined our church
Right.
uh, around the same time, um, but around the age of 14, maybe 15.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I had a crush on this girl, and I just, it was the first girl I ever had a crush on.
Right.
So uh, her parents went to the church, and they were just really kind, really nice.
Mm-hmm.
And again, to me, even to this day, when somebody's overly kind,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's not genuine,
Mm-hmm.
and I have to intentionally uh, set my mind to
Mm-hmm.
not judge their kindness in the wrong way. So, but I did. I started talking to this girl. We were friends, of course. We were so young, and I remember going to her house the first time, and I remember they made dinner. We all sat at the uh, kitchen table and ate dinner together, and then afterwards they had dessert, which I'm like, okay, this is crazy. Like, what's the special occasion? And then after that, they all went downstairs to watch a movie, and I'm thinking like, are they doing all this for me? And I'm looking around, and I remember the dad looked at me, and he's like, Aaron, he's like, it's okay to relax. He's like, you're okay. You can just relax, enjoy yourself. He's like, you want a pop? You want something to drink? And I'm like, I get pop too? Like I get I get dessert and pop. Like you're asking me what I want. It was
Yeah.
just it. My mind couldn't comprehend
Mm-hmm.
that a parent. Now my mother was awesome, but she was so busy defending herself and us. She
Yes.
never had time to give us,
Yes.
you
Yes.
know, love like that. So when I was being offered and given options
Mm-hmm.
for things that were comforting, I just didn't know how to receive it.
Right. Right.
And it made me feel uh,
Uncomfortable.
ashamed and
Uncomfortable.
but
Uncomfortable.
yeah,
Uncomfortable.
I was very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I didn't know how to relax.
Yes. Right.
I still have a hard time accepting
Yes.
things from people,
Yes. Yes.
even my wife.
Yeah, I can understand it. I mean, I know because I've dealt with issues like that, so I know, and that's why I said, I know exactly why you're feeling the way you are feeling. It's because you, first of all, you could never trust relationships. One, so when anyone seems so different from what you were experiencing, you're not going to trust that either. So the family that you met, who was very nice, and it actually is a normal way of being in most families, you never experienced that, so you didn't trust that. So it was like you're holding back for the other shoe to drop, kind of thing. That's the kind
Yeah.
of, you're holding back for the other shoe to drop, kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
And so
Hmm.
yes, I understand what you experienced. And now it seemed also that the dad who said, you can relax, Aaron, you can relax, he sensed that you were also not very relaxed. He may have
Oh
seen
yeah.
that you obviously didn't really, that something wasn't, you weren't comfortable in that
Yeah.
environment.
Yes. And they had some background on me because you know, God rest his soul. And like my dad was no stranger to the church. You know, he would
Oh,
show up,
okay. Okay.
and he was not ashamed to show up
Oh,
and
wow.
be.
And I remember this the story you told earlier of him chasing you guys out with machetes and guns outside. So you were outside, so the neighbors could see you running from him. He basically, right? So they probably knew the whole dynamic of what was happening in the home. So, and you said this family was close by. Were they close by? Did they know you
No,
before? Oh,
they
okay.
knew us once they came after they had been at the church for a while. They were at the church for a good while, maybe a year or two before I ever was invited over. Before I,
Okay.
uh, yeah. So they in that 1 to 2 year time frame, they had met my dad, either whether he showed up to a church event um, or through other special occasions, whatever. He would show up, but not as like a let's have fun together. He was always like keeping an eye on everyone and letting people know, like, I'm watching you. He didn't trust anyone.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So just to give our viewers some kind of idea of your everyday life, can you kind of describe what a week would look like in your life? Coming, yes, yeah, I know, because I want them to know where you're coming from and how you've gotten to where you are, and so the difference that God made in your life. So I wanted them to kind of understand.
So, like a week as a child,
Yes, yes.
um, mm,
Sundays. Your dad would go to church most Sundays, or no? Or what would
no,
happen? Okay.
not at all. I can remember my dad from the time I was born to the time he died, which my dad died when I was 26.
Mm-hmm.
I can remember him coming to church to actually be involved in like a service to sit there.
Mm-hmm.
I remember him coming twice.
Wow. Okay.
Uh, I remember he came once with one of his good friends, the friend that he bought me my first drum set from,
Mm-hmm.
and then I remember him coming after he had gotten sick one time, and he came to hear me play the drums because he
Okay.
had never come and heard at the church.
Okay.
Uh, but other than that, no, we would go to church on Sundays. He would stay at home and drink, and so a week in my life, like as a child, preteen even, it would be, well, this was like every day.
Mm-hmm.
Wake up,
Mm-hmm.
go to school, come home, and um,
So when you went to school, how was that experience for you?
I was never really very focused.
Okay.
I was always actually over talkative, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
It always felt like an opportunity for me to be who I thought was myself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I could talk to people without being afraid of consequences,
Okay.
so I never stopped talking. Really terrible focus, but things were so crazy um, that I didn't really have to worry about anything getting back home and then dealing with that because we were so busy trying to survive that my parents didn't have time to care if I got a C or a D in a class. Now, which was really crazy because even in school, through starting in preschool, we would come home and my father, he was really adamant about us being smart and reading and being intelligent and writing. So he would make us write after school and read book reports that he wrote.
Mm-hmm.
And if you didn't read the word correctly, you could, I mean, the consequences were ridiculous, but
What were they? What were the consequences?
I mean, he would just his language, his speech was so coarse
Mm-hmm.
and abrasive.
Mm-hmm.
And after a while, I mean, you get so many chances before you're getting beat. But again, to me, then getting beat with a broom or a belt or extension cord or whatever, it was normal.
Normal. It was normal. Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't like, oh my God, we're being abused. It was like, I messed up again.
Right. Right.
And I don't know. It was just every day there was no peace. I don't even know how else to explain. Like in the house, in my home,
Mm-hmm.
there was no escape from turmoil and just constant. Uh, I don't know. It was just there was no peace.
So there was a lot of arguing and cursing and what when you say no peace, what did that look like?
Well, it wasn't even arguing because my mother was a very quiet woman,
Yeah.
and no matter what, she was always in her understanding, which I understand. She always, no matter what, wanted to honor God and honor her husband.
Right.
So she would never speak uh, in a negative way about him.
Mm-hmm.
She would never respect him, but he could sit for hours. I mean, from 3 p.m. to 2 a.m. and just cuss
Mm-hmm.
everyone in the house out nonstop. At the top of his lungs. I'm like, how can somebody yell and scream for so long and not be exhausted?
Mm-hmm.
But again, realizing that when you're under the influence of alcohol and things like that, it's a different. I believe it's a different entity that controls your actions and your emotions.
Yeah.
So
They're spirits. That's pretty much it. The spirit, yeah.
yeah.
Right. So what kind of physical abuse did you have to suffer at the hands of your dad and your mom as well, right? Both of you. What kind of
Well,
physical?
yeah. Well, I mean, the first person to ever give me a bloody nose or a busted lip from a fist was my dad. Actually, the first and probably the only. Um, uh, it made me afraid, of him, but it also made me angry. Uh, I don't know, just pretty much. I mean, tree branches, fist,
Mm-hmm.
being strangled and choked out, like literally held down on the ground, not being able to breathe. And then it was like his way of teaching and showing how to be a strong man. Like, I'm going to choke you till you can't breathe.
Wow.
And I'm going to let you breathe for a second. Then I'm going to choke you again.
Oh my goodness.
You better not cry.
Wow. Wow. Wow.
So I remember doing that. And one of my cousins actually sitting on the stairs crying, watching him choke me.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just so angry.
Mm-hmm.
It just built anger, built more and more and more till I finally got to the point where I'm like, the first opportunity I get, I'm going to kill somebody.
Okay. So now tell me about the time, because you said you left at, was it 18? You said the first chance you could get, you left. Tell me, where did you leave to go to? What was the experience, and how did that experience basically lead you to how did Jesus turn up for you?
So when I was 18,
Mm-hmm.
that same girl who I started talking to when I was 14,
Mm-hmm.
we were like, oh, we are so in love. We were silly. I was
Yeah.
silly.
Yeah.
And I'm like, we're gonna get married. It doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
We got engaged.
Mm-hmm.
I spent my entire year's salary of a Kmart paycheck on a engagement and it was still like that big, but
Yeah.
um, moved in with her. We got an apartment, and
Your audio went down a bit. I don't know if you're close or you moved back when you something.
oh, can you hear me now?
I can hear you, but it's a little lower than before. I don't know what happened.
Oh, that's weird.
Well,
I,
yeah, but let's continue.
so
Yeah, you're okay now.
okay, I moved in with her,
Mm-hmm.
and that was actually the beginning of the downward spiral of life. Um, we thought we thought we were grown and we knew
Yes.
enough to do everything, and we knew nothing
Right.
except for how to hurt each other. I definitely didn't know how to. I didn't know how to have a healthy relationship,
Right.
um, and I actually experienced more hurt in the relationship
Mm-hmm.
than anything. And that's, I mean, that's her story to tell on that side. But there were issues on both sides
Mm-hmm.
where we needed to be healed and we didn't know how. So we just were toxic. Um, we were very, very unhealthy.
Mm-hmm.
And that led to a whole lifestyle for me. She was the first girl I ever talked to. Like, she was my first girlfriend, everything. Um, and in our arguments and everything, I remember we had one huge argument and, whatever details, but that huge argument made us kind of separate a little bit. And that was the first time that I was introduced to, after that was the first time that I had met a person in college, and this lady, who's much older than me, invited me over for a party. And at that party was the first time I drank alcohol.
Okay.
I was 19,
Mm-hmm.
and within a week after I drank the first beer I ever had, I was a stone cold alcoholic.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I needed alcohol every day, every moment I could have it, and I would shake without it.
Okay.
Um,
What happened after that?
so I drank very heavily for 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
Drinking, then that led into drugs, like in cocaine and marijuana and pills and antidepressants, just anything that I could get
Mm-hmm.
to be high or intoxicated or drunk. Because those things gave me this courage to be outspoken and to be social
Mm-hmm.
that I never had before. And in these drugs and alcohol, in this alcohol, I find myself making friends.
Right.
And I was never really good at making friends before that.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but all the friends were other people who were heavy into drugs and alcohol and all this stuff, except for one good friend I had.
Mm-hmm.
Um, my friend Todd, he's still a really good friend of mine. But so after that, I mean, and I was always a musician. Got my first drum set from that friend of my dad's I told you about when I was 3 years old, and I grew up playing drums and playing in the church. So with the drugs and alcohol and being a musician, I finally joined a band
Mm-hmm.
full time. And I'm like, this is going to be my life. I'm going to do drugs. I'm going to meet women all over the world. I'm going to play music, and I'm not going to do anything else for the rest of my life. Nobody's going to tell me what to do. Nobody's going to tell me where to be. I'm gonna sin as much as possible. Literally,
So you
those were my
basically,
exact words.
so you were aware that you were making a choice to sin, basically,
Absolutely.
right?
I literally said out of my mouth, I am going to sin as much as I possibly can.
Oh Lord. Do you know why you may have said that? Why do you think that you said that?
Because I still even have a habit of making light of situations that are actually really heavy for
Mm-hmm.
me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, terribly.
Yes.
And I was convicted of my actions
Mm-hmm.
constantly, and I
Right.
would try to drown them with substances.
Right.
And we would even have this saying, me and my friends hung out, and there was this old movie. It was a terrible movie. I
Mm-hmm.
would never watch it now because it was just stupid. It was called Little Nicky. And the punchline of the movie was, let the sin begin.
Ah.
And, and everybody would just chant that. And I'm just like, we're saying this as a joke. And inside, I'm just like, God, what is happening to me?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There was so much anger and disappointment, not only in my life and in my father,
Mm-hmm.
and I was disappointed in myself and how out of control I was, and that I didn't know how to not be
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know how to not be an alcoholic. I didn't know how to not be addicted. I didn't know how to not be angry.
Mm-hmm.
So I was trying to cover it up with humor and sarcasm.
Right. So you left. So you left the church at this time. By this time, you
Oh
decided
yeah,
church was no
sure.
longer for me, right? And so
Yeah,
you were traveling in different places. So you were not near your hometown anymore. Is why what I gathered from your interview.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, that was a very special moment in life because the church that I left was my wife's dad's church. Like I grew up in her father's church,
Oh,
and
okay.
he knew me
Mhm.
from birth.
Wow.
Uh, he came to the church when I was 4 years old as a traveling evangelist, and
Right.
I just thought he was the best person I've ever met in my life. Like he was a pastor, and for some reason, I was always intrigued by pastors. Like I thought that being a pastor and preaching was the coolest thing ever. Everything, nothing was cooler than that. And then he was a musician, and I was born a musician. I've
Mhm.
never not known how to play instruments.
Mhm.
So everything about him and who he was and just his kindness, I loved it. And he really took me in
Mhm.
when he came as evangelist. And then when I was 7 years old, he came to the church and became my pastor.
Mhm.
And she was like one year old. So,
Yeah. So you
uh,
guys go back a long way, right?
yeah. So it was him. I called him. I remember when I got the opportunity to start traveling and join this band, I
Hmm.
called him first
Right.
because first of all, I knew I shouldn't be going. I knew what we
Right.
were going to do, and
Right.
I respected him. And honestly,
Yes.
if he would have told me not to go,
Hmm.
I wouldn't go.
Right.
I wanted to go so bad, and so I called him. I called him I called my pastor from a strip club
Yes, I remember that.
to
Was he
ask
the
him.
one? Was he the
Huh?
one who told you that wherever you are, what if you ever get into trouble and need him, he would come for you? He'd be there for you
Yeah.
wherever you are,
Yep.
no matter where you are.
Yeah.
Okay,
Absolutely.
awesome.
And I knew he meant it.
Yes, yes. So tell me now about when when, because there was a point where something happened. You had an experience with Jesus Christ, really. And
Yeah.
tell me about that experience and
So I was out with this band, traveling and doing music full time. It was my income. It was what I had settled on. This is my life till I
yeah.
die, which
Hmm.
I would assume would have been sooner than later. Um, but I had accepted that. I was expecting to die.
Yeah.
Um, and I came home on a weekend from either Iowa or Chicago. I know we were coming back from that way, from west. And I went to all of the clubs and the bars that I had become pretty popular at from music and just hanging out and being drunk and a clown and just, getting to know people. I
Hmm.
went to all those bars, I remember on Friday night, and everywhere I went, it was like people were shunning me. Nobody wanted anything to do with me.
Hmm.
They were too busy or they had new friends. And I'm like, this is not normal because I went from not having any friends when I was a child to in my early 20s, everyone was my friend.
Hmm.
Everyone loved me, so I thought I was popular. So then I came back from traveling,
Yeah.
and no one had time for me. I was so lonely that I didn't even know how to process life. It started on the road though. Like I would sit in a van. I remember sitting in our trailer, 15 passenger van, and just drink and smoke and cry for hours and
Hmm.
then go do.
Okay. I don't know what happened. Oh,
Yep,
okay.
there we go.
Yeah.
So I would drink and smoke and everything for hours in
Hmm.
a van alone and cry
Hmm.
as if and then go do a show right after that as if everything was okay, and then come
Hmm.
back after the show and do the same. So when I get back and this same loneliness is still here, where I figured I'm going to where I know people now and I can just refuel myself with partying and socializing. It was the same thing. It was like I was completely alone. So I went out Saturday night and the same thing. And I get home Saturday night and fall asleep probably at 5 in the morning. 9 o'clock Sunday morning, her dad, my pastor, Bernard Lawson, great. He's honestly one of the greatest men I've ever known in my life, still to this day. He called me. He was like, "Hey son, how's it going?" And as soon as he said, "Hey son, how's it going?" and I realized it was Sunday, I was just like, "Oh my God." I'm thinking like he's gonna ask me to come to church, and he's like, "Hey, where are you at?" And I didn't let him know I was back. I didn't want anybody to know. He's like, "Where are you at?" And he was my pastor, so I wasn't gonna lie to him. And I said, I'm at home. And he's like, would you mind coming to church and playing drums for us this morning? And I felt immediately just filthy. I'm like, I'm covered in smoke, and I smell like weed and alcohol and just the world and sin. I just was filthy. And I was like, yeah, pastor, I'll be there. I knew church started at 10:30. I didn't show up until like 11:15, 11:30, and the church was sitting there waiting for me.
Oh my
They didn't
goodness.
even start serving.
Wow.
And I walked in, and he was like, "Hey, brother Aaron!" Like everybody clapped, everybody was happy to see me,
Wow.
and I felt great and terrible all at the same time.
Yeah.
So then I went up to the drums shamefully, and I played drums.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the first time in years that I had played drums without being high or drunk.
Uh-huh.
So it felt foreign to me.
Mm-hmm.
So I get done with the music, and usually the messages after that, I left immediately. I didn't want to hear any messages. I don't want to hear any scriptures. I just need to get out of here as fast as possible.
Mm-hmm.
So I left and went back to the club and hung out all night until 5 in the morning again, different bars. And then Monday morning, I had been asleep maybe 3 hours or so. Monday morning at 9 o'clock, I just woke up, wide awake. And I had the most horrible hangover, and I was still not well. I was intoxicated. It was awful. I was everything. I took a lot of drugs and alcohol that night.
Mm-hmm.
I woke up at 9 and I turned on the TV, and there was a man that was preaching. And my first thought was, honest to goodness, I said, what is this fool talking about? I wanted to judge anything that came out of his mouth. Whatever he said to me was going to be garbage. It was like, it's stupid. I don't know why either, because I didn't grow up that way, but I was just like, I don't want to hear it.
Mm-hmm.
And the first thing he said was, Hebrews 11:1 says, faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. After that, I don't know what else that man said. It was like my entire world just was flipped right side up. Like I was instantly sober. I didn't smell like smoke on my clothes. My house didn't smell like smoke.
Wow.
My eyes were clear. My taste was clear. My brain, my thinking was clear. My heart was well. Like I literally felt brand new.
Brand new.
Immediately after hearing that. And I sat up in my bed, and I remember saying like, God, what's going on? And then I remember God's voice saying, and it was, of course, was it audible?
Right.
I don't know. I just know that it was God.
Mm-hmm.
He said, Aaron, faith is a substance. And I'm like, and he said, water is a substance. And he said, if you put water in a freezer, it turns to ice. If you put water in a fire, it turns to steam. He said, your faith is the same way, because it's a substance as well. He said, it doesn't matter how much you believe in me.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't keep yourself in the right atmosphere, your faith will never be effective.
Mm.
And instantly, the thing that brought me to Christ, I was like, God, I want to see the power of faith, the power of your word operate in my life. I want to be able to pray for people and see them healed and delivered and set free. I want to be able to, as the Bible says, like speak those things that are not as though they were. Like I immediately wanted to experience the power of God and share that with people. It was like in that moment, I immediately wanted to be used by God to set people free. And I remember saying, well, God, what do you want me to do? And it was so clear. Now, at this time, I was 23, and my jobs before, well, I was making, pennies. I was working at Circuit City, and nothing wrong with that, but I had no desire to do anything else except play music, do drugs, and everything. Now, instantly, I'm like, Lord, I'm making this money. I was making like $1,000 a week playing drums and doing drugs and not spending any of that money on food. And then God said to me, I was like, God, what do you want me to do? He's like, I want you to quit the band. And I immediately thought, but Lord, I don't have a degree. Like, I don't have another job. I don't have income. But he said again, like, I want you to quit the band. And when I heard it a second time so clear, I was like, done. I'm quitting. I got on the phone and I called the guys that I was in the band with, and I'm like, hey guys, I was like, I'm really sorry. This was Monday. We were supposed to leave the next day to go to Florida to start the next part of our tour. And I was the drummer. Like, I knew all the music. They had nobody else. We were under contracts. We had an agent. And when I called them and said, I am so sorry, I have to quit. And they're like, dude, shut up. Like, stop. Like, we were going to pay you more. Like, we love having you. Like, everything's cool. Like, we were going to talk to you about it. Let's just talk when we come and pick you up later tonight. And I was like, I can't go. I said, God told me I have to quit the band. And they went bananas. They were so upset. And I did put them in a bad position. But I was so sure that I had just heard God's voice clearly, and he gave me clear direction that no one else's opinion mattered to me. And there was only one of them that said, man, if God is telling you you have to quit, then you have to quit.